This is Sydney.
And I'm Sher. And each week we get together to share with you a message of hope.
It is through our own study and our personal experiences that we offer the reminder to not only seek the light,
but be the light. You can find peace, and there is hope.
And as long as one of us is slightly caffeinated, there will be laughter.
Welcome to our final summer series,
Part 5.
Benedict Arnold.
And we're so glad you're here.
I'm forging my way through the tip top. I'm living my life through the drip drop. When eternity's plan, I just...
Sydney, today we're going to talk about Benedict Arnold. This is one of my very favorite topics to teach. My students love learning about Benedict Arnold because I feel like his life would make an absolutely incredible Hollywood movie. It shows light and dark so clearly, and it has all the elements that you need in a really good movie. When I read about Benedict Arnold, it shows how one wrong choice leads to another, and then another, and then another, until it's too late to turn back.
Relatable.
Right? That's what I was thinking. That's why I love learning about him, is because unfortunately, I see myself in him and what happens if you let the bad part of you just continue to grow.
That's painful. Also, did you know some people will call people a Benedict Arnold?
I did.
It's a term.
Yes.
I've looked it up on Urban Dictionary for you. You want to know? Or is it a spoiler?
No, go ahead.
Okay. When you pull a Benedict Arnold, you sell out your side and join the stronger side of a situation out of fear, not honor.
Absolutely. That's what he did.
I'm going to start using that in my daily life. You Benedict Arnold.
And we're going to learn about Benedict Arnold and how he did sell us out. Also, when we're learning about him, I just want you to think about this too. The phrase, "but by the grace of God go I." When I am learning about him, I have that thought come into my head over and over again because it is such a slippery slope. But this story does give us another opportunity to see God directing and guiding the colonists. We can learn from this story that God wants us to have liberty and enjoy the natural rights and gifts that he has given us, and will be guided and directed if we listen to him. And it's always in our best interest to stand for Christ. It also shows what can happen when we don't stand up for what we believe and let anger, jealousy, and greed take over.
Letting anger take over sums up my summer pretty good.
Don't let it take over. Do not become a Benedict Arnold.
I'm not Benedict Arnold. I am not.
I hope not, because if you are, then this isn't going to work out well for me.
For anyone really in this story.
All right. So Benedict Arnold was born in Connecticut and he became a businessman. He married Margaret Mansfield and she died just as the American Revolution was starting.
Okay, but I read she was 18 and he was 37 when they got married.
Okay, wrong wife. And we'll get to that.
Okay. I know so much. That was a quiz. I just want to see if you knew. Huh?
Yeah, just checking.
Can't wait to see if you know the right answer later.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Okay.
Benedict fought in the French and Indian War. Remember, we talked about that war with George Washington. And Benedict is then going to become an officer in the American Revolution. He was known for a few things. Now, I just looked over in some books I have and on the internet, and I pulled out some key words that described Benedict Arnold. So these are the things that I found, the positive things about Benedict Arnold. He was known in the American Revolution for his strategic thinking and planning, his courage, his leadership skills, and his passion. He was a gifted soldier and officer. In one of my all-time favorite books called The Indispensable Man, it's about George Washington, it says this about him. Benedict Arnold was, in fact, the greatest combat general in the war on either side. He was a major part of many battles in the American Revolution for the Americans and was responsible for key victories that we had in the American Revolution. But he was also known for being petty, argumentative, vain, emotional, jealous, greedy, and combative with his superiors and political leaders. He had these amazing gifts and talents, but he also had some really terrible and horrible faults.
Relatable again.
Right? And that's the thing, is you can see that in everyone. God has given all of us gifts and talents, but unfortunately, we all have things that aren't so good. We all have faults, and then it becomes a battle of which side is going to win out. Benedict Arnold, unfortunately, let the not so good side win out. Benedict Arnold is very famous for being the hero in the Battle of Saratoga. The Battle of Saratoga is super important in the American Revolution because it was a turning point for the Americans. This is when France decided, you know what? These colonists have something going on and they might actually have a chance against Britain. Now, remember the French and Indian War? It was actually between France and Britain over world power and dominance. So France was loving this little war between the colonists and Britain. They thought it was great.
I thought you were going to quiz me right there, and I got so nervous. Google was out. I was ready.
It's true.
And then you let it go. Thank you.
It's true. I saw the look of terror and panic on your face.
My face turned red.
It's all good. I'm here. I got you.
I was like, did we learn about this one? I can't remember.
So France, they're loving this war. They decided after the Battle of Saratoga that we actually might have a chance to defeat Britain. And so they decided to send their military over to help us out. Benedict was a key person in the Battle of Saratoga, and he was known throughout all of the colonies for being a hero, and he's definitely one of the reasons why we won this Battle of Saratoga. Unfortunately, his leg was injured very badly. In fact, many thought that he would never be able to walk again, but he powered through it and he did get better. Even though he was a hero at the Battle of Saratoga and he had other great important victories in the past, Congress did not give him a promotion. The reason is because he didn't get along with them. Remember, he didn't get along with leadership, so they just looked right over him.
Because it's about who you know, not what you know.
It's true, and who he knew, he made them angry, and so they didn't want to help him out and give him a promotion. But George Washington just thought the whole thing was silly. He gave him a military command over the city of Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia had been controlled by the British, but the Americans were able to kick the British out of Philadelphia, and so now the Americans had control of it. So he sent Benedict Arnold in over the military command there, and he thought this would be a nice, cushy job. He'd still have command, but he would also have time to heal his leg so that he could return back to the battlefield. George Washington thought, I'm helping him out. While he was in Philadelphia, this is where he met a beautiful she's from a very wealthy family, Peggy Shippen.
Hey, did you know that Peggy was 18 when he was 37 when they got married? That's all I have to contribute to this. That was it. I listened to 8 YouTube videos on it, and the only thing that stood out was that age gap. That'd be tough.
It would. And my students, they always were like, when we got to that part.
Because they were young. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, ugh, that's so young for him. Because I'm on the older side of this. And the other kids are young that they're like, ew, marrying an old man.
Yeah, that's exactly what my students would scream about too. Another thing you have to look at is look up a picture of Peggy Shippen. You've got to check out her hair. It is pretty fabulous.
I'm going to do that now.
Very tall.
Okay, that is intense hair. What is she hiding? If a woman has that big of hair, she's hiding something, they've said.
I'm pretty sure that hair is taller than me.
Maybe she was very short.
Oh, yeah.
And they made her feel bad about herself. So she grew her hair up. I'm going to do this. And be like, oh no, I used to be 5'2", almost. And now I am 6'7".
That's, I think, where she went with that hairdo.
She'd get so many likes on social media with that.
She would. And I think she was all about that. She loved that.
This is where Dolly Parton gets her inspiration, I think.
No, not from Peggy Shippen. It can't be. No, she actually got it from the female worker in the town.
The entrepreneur.
Anyway, moving on. Peggy Shippen was from a very, very wealthy family. Her family and Peggy wanted to stay with the British. They didn't want to get in this fight. They did not want to leave Britain. They wanted to stay with Britain. And because they wanted to stay with Britain, they're called loyalists. Peggy Shippen was a loyalist, and she's going to marry an American Revolution war hero, Benedict Arnold. Can you see the problem here?
Drama.
Yeah, it's
the hair.
Not only is it the hair, it's the word she used, convincing Benedict Arnold he was on the wrong side. When the British were occupying Philadelphia, she loved the British soldiers there. She thought it was a great time because she loved flirting with the British officers, and she was really sad that they left. But then enters Benedict Arnold, and she loved that he was a hero and a guy in uniform. And eventually the two of them are going to get married, and they absolutely adored each other. They really loved each other, and she couldn't wait to share with Benedict Arnold all the reasons why he was wrong and that he should join the British side and be a loyalist. Now, one of the British soldiers that Peggy met when they were in Philadelphia, and she flirted with him a lot. His name was John Andre. So remember John Andre. Once Benedict Arnold and Peggy got married, remember she's from a very wealthy family. Well, he wanted to be able to keep up that rich lifestyle, and it was a very, very expensive lifestyle, and the American soldiers were lucky if they ever even got paid.
He's a gold digger and a cradle robber.
Yeah, he's both.
He's a Benedict Arnold.
He is a Benedict Arnold. Now, the thing is, though, he's the guy and he's supposed to be taking care of her, and he didn't have the same amount of money as her daddy. He's trying to be like her dad, but he just didn't have the resources. And so he is going to start going into severe debt.
Okay, see, that's why Ben married me, because I was poor and it was an easy step up for him. Like, he was like, I could give you fresh bread. And I was like, wow.
My dad said that about my mom. He had nothing, but she had less, so it was easy for him.
That is a real love story there.
Also, remember that she is going to let him know her point of view about the revolution and the British. So all of these things are starting to add up. To add to the problem that is slowly being created here, while in Philadelphia, Benedict is going to make way too many civilian leaders angry because he's hanging out with loyalists all the time. He's also living an overly extravagant lifestyle. And the civilian leaders are like, where are you getting that money? Because we know you're not making it being an American officer. So they concluded that he must be doing something shady.
Which is interesting because that's how people feel about politicians these days.
It's
They're
true.
like, it's interesting your net worth is $17.5 million when you make $150 a year, supposedly.
When I was putting this together, I'm like, nothing has changed.
The math isn't mathing.
It definitely wasn't.
The story is drama.
It is. It's lots of drama.
I think I'm paying attention to this one better than any.
Oh, good. So they took him to court and he was sentenced to be reprimanded by the commander-in-chief. That was his sentence. So George Washington, this was his reprimand. The commander-in-chief would have been much happier in an occasion of bestowing commendations of an officer who has rendered such distinguished service to his country. That was his reprimand. As you can tell, Washington believed in Benedict. He wanted to help him. He looked out for him, and he thought this whole thing was just silly. And so he just kind of brushed it off. But it infuriated Benedict Arnold. Washington and Benedict Arnold had a little discussion one day. Washington was so excited because he had worked out a way to get Benedict Arnold back on the battlefield. And he couldn't wait to tell Benedict, hey, this is the plan I have for you. But Benedict Arnold didn't seem so happy about it, which Washington thought was kind of weird. Benedict Arnold just kept saying, I'm not ready. I'm just not ready for it. I'm not ready to go back to the battlefield. So Washington thought that Benedict Arnold must be depressed, that he was a little bit broken. He had given up with all the drama that had been going on.
Relatable again.
Yes. So Washington went with the attitude of trying to inspire him and build him up and saying, you can do this. You've got this, Benedict. But Benedict didn't want to hear it, and he suggested to George Washington that he move him to West Point. George Washington was like, but you're a battlefield man. But no, Benedict Arnold wanted to go to West Point. George Washington agreed and said, great, I'll let you have command there. Now, West Point, what Benedict was supposed to do was fortify it. It was a very important fort. It overlooked the Hudson River. And the reason this was so important is because if the British were able to go up the Hudson River, they could cut the revolutionary forces in half with their navy. And so they had to protect the Hudson River so our forces didn't get divided. The reason that Benedict Arnold was acting weird and that he didn't want to go to the battlefield, he wanted to go to West Point, is because his wife had introduced him to her old flirting buddy, John Andre. John Andre was a very popular officer that even the Americans liked because he was so charismatic and just an overall good guy. But John Andre told Benedict Arnold that for a very large sum of money, which remember Benedict Arnold really needed the cash because he was getting way too much in debt, and Benedict Arnold would also get a command in the British Army if Benedict could give the British something of value. Benedict thought about it, and he decided that he wanted to hand John Andre and the British West Point, plus he wanted to hand over his good friend, George Washington. He not only turned on his country, but his friend. And I think this is one of the reasons why this story got to my students so much, is because those friendships, especially in middle school, are so important. And to have one of his best friends turn on him like this is just devastating. My students would latch on to how hurtful that had to have been for George Washington.
I think you could latch on to so many of these points here, especially the big hair.
Yeah.
I used that aqua spray in the 80s too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like you could smell the chemicals, like you tasted them for the next 24 hours, but it was worth it.
Yeah. Benedict Arnold and John Andre met in the middle of the night to finalize their plan. The plan that was going to go down was the very next day, Washington would arrive to inspect West Point. The British Navy would then attack. Benedict Arnold would immediately surrender and hand the fort and George Washington over to the British Navy. However, on the way back from meeting with Benedict, John Andre ran into 3 American soldiers on his way back to the British side. So in the middle of the night, of all the things, he happens to run into 3 American soldiers. It seems super suspicious to the American soldiers, and so they decided that they were going to hand him over to their commander. When John Andre realized that he and his great personality was not able to talk them out of it, he offered them a huge sum of money to let him go.
That adds to the suspicion, my friend.
It does. And those 3 soldiers who had no money said, "No way, you're going to our commander." The commander then started to search him, and they found all of the plans that he and Benedict Arnold had made. So the commander, not realizing who the American officer was that was involved in this, immediately took the information to his commanding officer, who was Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold realized John Andre had been caught, therefore he was going to get caught, so he ran away. Washington, meanwhile, the next day was really excited to go hang out with Benedict Arnold and to inspect the fort. He arrived at the fort, but Benedict Arnold wasn't there, so he walked around, looked at things, and thought, this is really odd that Benedict, my good friend, isn't here. So George Washington wasn't captured and the fort wasn't taken. And the reason the British Navy didn't show up like they were supposed to is because there was a really strong windstorm that kept the British Navy from getting up the river like they were supposed to.
It's almost as if there was some divine intervention going on.
Yep.
God is like, enough of this drama and hair. Let's calm it down.
Thank goodness we have a God that looks out for us that way. So in the late afternoon, Alexander Hamilton. I knew, I was waiting for it. He rushed to George Washington to tell him the news about Benedict Arnold's betrayal to our country. Washington replied, "Arnold has betrayed us. Whom can we trust now?" George Washington, throughout the entire war, had dealt with people that were jealous of him, that were backstabbers, and he was constantly watching his back because there were way too many people that he couldn't trust because they wanted to be him. But Benedict Arnold was his friend, and he was devastated, he was hurt, and he was betrayed. Benedict is going to escape, and he's going to leave his wife behind, not permanently, just for a little bit until he can get his life in order. George Washington went to his wife, Peggy, and she said that she was completely innocent, and Washington just accepted it. That was so unusual for the time period. It would have been totally okay for Washington to arrest her, but he didn't, and the country wanted to get even. Instead, George Washington told his military, "The providential train of circumstances which led to it affords the most convincing proof that the liberties of America are the object of divine protection." That's what he told the military, but the country wasn't really happy with that response, and they wanted something done and people gathered up and punished for what had just happened. So this is what he told the country. I'm reading now from the book, Washington, Indispensable Man. Washington warned that witch hunts would serve the enemy by sowing jealousy, and if we swallow the bait, no character will be safe. There will be nothing but mutual distrust. He labored to turn the popular emotion to gratitude that the plot had been foiled. In no instance since the commencement of the war has the interposition of Providence been more conspicuous than in the rescue of the post and the garrison of West Point from Arnold's villainous treason. George Washington wanted to stop the distrust, the witch hunt, and he wanted America to be grateful that we were protected by God. And he wanted the military and the country to understand how important liberty is to God and to us as his children. He wanted us to focus on what was important and give thanks and show gratitude.
In a story full of drama, he said the drama stops here. He did.
That's what he did. Benedict Arnold, on the other hand, is not going to extend that grace or have the understanding of liberty that George Washington taught the country. The example that I want to give you of how Benedict Arnold becomes is in New London, Connecticut. In New London, there seemed to be a lot of shenanigans going on. The residents were capturing a lot of British merchant boats. So Benedict was sent to get the American boats that were causing the problems with the British boats and also to destroy any military supplies in the town. I'm going to read what happened to that town of New London. Arnold led his men through New London and ordered torch parties to burn everything of military value. They burned over 140 buildings, including docks, warehouses, shops, barns, and houses. as many as 12 ships, and considerable quantity of military stores. They also set fire to the church, jail, courthouse, and other public buildings. Arnold spared almost nothing and made no effort to restrain his men from looting and burning private homes. Gunpowder stored in one of the warehouses ignited, spreading fire through the town. They, as in the citizens, watched powerless as New London burned. That's what Benedict Arnold did to New London, Connecticut. But it doesn't stop there. There was a fort called Fort Griswold that was protecting the town. There were men there from the ages of 14 to 55. There was about 150 American men versus 900 British soldiers. The Americans are going to run out of ammo, and they started using pikes in the butt of their guns as the British soldiers were coming over the fort to just try to get them back. 25% of the British soldiers were either killed or wounded. There was a hero in this story. His name is Jordan Freeman. He was once the slave of Colonel William Ledyard that was the commander of this fort. When Major Montgomery, the British officer that was leading the charge at Fort Griswold, as he started to come up and over the fort, Jordan Freeman grabbed a 10-foot pike and just speared him with it and killed him. The British then retreated and allowed the Americans time to regather. It's going to take the British a lot longer to take over this fort. They thought it would be an easy, quick takeover, no problem. But it took a long time, and they lost a lot of men in the process, so they were very angry. Once the British got inside the fort, they started fighting in hand-to-hand combat with their bayonets, and the Americans were just fighting with anything they had. But as the British soldiers just kept coming in, Colonel William Ledyard, he realized that they were going to lose, and so he ordered his men to throw down their weapons and surrender. A British officer yelled, "Who commands this fort?" And Colonel Ledyard said, "I did, sir, but you do now," and he handed over his sword to the British officer. The British officer grabbed the sword and took Ledyard's own sword and stabbed him and killed him. One of the men that saw this, his name was Lambert Latham. He was another African-American soldier, ran to the defense of his commander. Lambert grabbed his bayonet and stabbed the British officer. The British were furious with Lambert, and with their bayonet stabbed him well over 30 times. It was a violent and terrible death. The British then opened fire and stabbed or shot everyone in the fort. This is how Benedict Arnold led his men.
Jerk.
Yeah. And remember, in all of this, Benedict Arnold was from Connecticut. He knew and was related to people in that fort and in the town of New London, and he didn't care. He let his soldiers loot the town and massacre all those men in the fort.
This really puts perspective on being called a Benedict Arnold. At first, it was kind of funny, and now that's a pretty bad word.
It is, and you can see how he had such talent for being a soldier, and look what happened to him. He went from being an honorable man to looting a town, burning it down, and massacring a fort. The irony in all of this is it is said that his last words were, "Let me die in this old uniform in which I fought my battles. May God forgive me for ever having put on another." The rumor is that he requested when he died to be buried in his American uniform. I don't know if that's true because he died in England. I don't know if he had his American uniform. But if it is true, what a tragedy that he lived his life knowing that he blew it and that he really did become a monster. I just want to compare his life to that of George Washington, who implored Americans to turn to God and recognize that he is our king and will guide and protect us. He chose gratitude and a thankful heart even when he was betrayed. I want you to compare this to the American soldiers that John Andre tried to bribe. They could have been rich, but instead they chose liberty over greed. And compare this to the hero at Fort Griswold, Jordan Freeman, that fought with the commanding officer that once owned him. He chose forgiveness of his former owner and fought along the side of him. Another man that chose forgiveness is Lambert Latham, who, as an African-American man in a time of such severe racism, rushed to his commanding officer to try to save his life. Benedict Arnold let pride, greed, and jealousy rule his emotions, and it overcame his heart. We have choices too. Our choice is a gift from God, and we can choose to follow him or not. We can choose to follow light or darkness. I truly pray that we choose to recognize that it is God that has protected us and given us so much prosperity and peace in the United States of America. And that is only possible if we continue to choose to follow our Heavenly Father. This is our prayer.
From Sydney and Sher. Thank you for joining us in our summer series.
Class dismissed.